Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 112 of the Rewarding Property Decisions podcast. Well, it feels a bit like Groundhog Day today. After last week's Underquoting podcast, the state government went on to make some further announcements just after I'd recorded. So I thought, well, best thing to do is to come back and have another to chat about it. So they're now proposing to require real estate agents and vendors to disclose what their reserve price will be about a week out from the actual auction or conclusion of expression of interest date. So I don't want to rehash everything that I spoke about last week because it's time consuming and you don't need to do that. You can go back and listen to last week's podcast. But I did want to go through the pros and cons around these legislation changes, and there are some really good parts, but there are some parts that I think need some further discussion and probably some changes. Whether or not that'll happen or not, we'll wait and see. So I've asked Jarrod and Telfer to join me. Thanks for coming, Gordo.
No worries at all. Pleasure.
So before we get into this, I thought we could point out that the proposal is still very, very much in its infancy, and it's just as a discussion point at this stage.
It's a bit more than a thought bubble, and we spoke about this during the week. Do we address this now? Do we not? Do we wait until legislation actually is presented to Parliament and goes through? But I think that what we came to is that, look, there's enough detail out there and in terms of what the government direction is, where they plan on taking it, that I think it's worth, even though there will be changes and amendments and it will be polished and a few rough edges taken off, there will be a bit more nuance to it.
Correct.
But it's been put out there. It's certainly out there for wide discussion this week amongst the industry, certainly. We thought it well worthwhile to
go further
to address it.
Yeah. So we thought we'll give you some of our thoughts from both a pro and con perspective for buyers, but also from a vendor's point of view as well. But I thought to start with, what I'll do is just give you a bit of an overview. I'm not going to go through the press release that the government put out because it's quite wordy and there's a lot of guff in there that we don't need to talk about. But I'll just highlight a couple of the points here. So to many young Victorians and families that are wrestling with Saturdays and attending auctions on a Saturday, chasing the dream of having a home on their own, only to have the rug pulled out from under them and the house sell for a lot more than the advertised price. The Allen government's ongoing work to stamp out illegal practices of underquoting, they're introducing Australian first laws that will be introduced next year, requiring real estate agents to publish vendors' reserve prices ahead of an auction or a fixed date sale. So let's go, I guess, to the start of that. And this is probably the biggest issue that we've spoken about, and I think that needs this further discussion, is that this idea that disclosing the reserve a week out is going to automatically make it a lot more easy for buyers going through the buying process. Because they're going to know what the reserve price is, they'll know whether or not they're in the fight to buy that property, which I think is very misleading.
It is, because ultimately, it's been said many times, it's the vendor's reserve for a property that's in high demand could be set at $1,000.
Yeah.
The market will decide what it's worth, ultimately. So I understand that purchasers might see a little bit more certainty there for them in that, this is the quote range, but this is the reserve. We're not there. Okay, then we won't go ahead with the building inspection. We won't get our contract check. We'll concentrate on other properties.
Yeah.
Okay, but if this is designed to try to make it fairer and allow people who may not have had an opportunity to purchase a particular property to give them a bit more of a rails run, I think that they're going to be a bit disappointed.
Well, how many auctions have you walked away from, whether we've been actively trying to buy it for a client or not, and you've walked away to go back to the car and heard the general mutterings of the crowd saying, they've paid way too much for that. That property that's not worth anywhere near that. And that's the thing. It's in the eye of the beholder. You can have two or three people that think it's worth a hell of a lot more than what you think it's worth, and a hell of a lot more than what the vendor might think it's worth.
Yeah.
And therefore, all of a sudden, the property's been quoted at 1 to 1.1, the reserve's declared at 1.1, and it sells for 1.35. And that's, I think, the thing that you can't legislate against that. And that's why we have auctions.
Yeah. I think that they've tried to in concurrence with these changes to the disclosure of the reserve, the government, and particularly in the hands of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, to see these through. Tightening up on the statement of information at the same time. Now,
that's another thing that we want to talk about. That's a good thing.
It was necessary. Yeah. If it's been treated as a joke the last couple of years. The statement of information being the document that's required to be provided to give prospective purchasers an understanding as to what sales have been looked at in support of the quote range that's been advertised. Yeah. They're tightening up on that because it's basically...
well, at the moment, it's the statement of information is there to justify the quote, not to justify the value of the property.
Reverse engineer. Yeah. And some of the comparable sales comparable with...
Laughable.
Are laughable. They're just not. And others that are comparable, that we know about, we've been through, they haven't even been used. So that's well and good. I mean, it does beg the question as to, well, how far should agents be expected to go to do the homework in a way for the purchaser? Are they representing the vendor? It's the purchasers there to do their own homework. That's another discussion. Mm. But that if they're going to have it, it needed to be tightened up, and that I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
The main issue though, being the requirement that a vendor's reserve is disclosed at least 7 days before the date of, let's say, auction.
Yep.
Okay, let's take out of it the expression of interest campaigns.
Just
and
for
other,
now, I mean, it's the same.
It's a set date.
It's a set date, so it's a week out from that. But the auction's probably where this is mostly targeted anyway.
It is, and this is what I think that if we drill down on this is where it's the time frame which is the issue more than anything. I think the 7 days, and interestingly enough, and I'm presuming he hasn't been misquoted, but Nick Stakos, the Minister for Consumer Affairs, has been quoted as saying that a property sales campaign is typically 4 weeks, so it means that vendors have a few weeks to properly assess the level of interest in their property. 7 days is a good amount of time for prospective buyers to make a final decision. A property sale campaign, and in his mind he's thinking auction campaign.
And that is a mistake though. I mean, and this is where the detail becomes important in these things. And I think sometimes it can be glossed over. And again, I come back to that point of this is early days, and so we're just putting things out there. But it is important, the detail around this. So it's a hell of a lot of property doesn't sell via auction. It's a sale campaign then. But underquoting is an issue with auctions and expressions of interest. So let's call it that, an auction campaign. And it might sound like we're being pedantic about that, but from a property perspective, it's important.
Because a sale campaign could be a private sale that takes 6 days, or it could take 6 months.
Yeah, so that's why you have it in that form.
Yeah, but what I zoned in on is typically 4 weeks. Well, it's not a 4-week campaign, and this will come to the point. It's a 4-weekend campaign for a typical auction. So you have your let's use as an example the typical campaign over October. Saturday the 4th of October, will be the first open for inspection. Yep. Sure, it's uploaded the Thursday prior, 2 days beforehand, but the doors get open for the first time Saturday 4th of October, second weekend Saturday the 11th, 18th, auctioned on the 25th. Yep. Between the 4th and the 25th, there's 3 weekends, 4 weeks.
That's the other way around.
Sorry,
4 weekends,
4 weekends, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's important because if under this proposed legislation, the vendor must disclose their reserves at least 7 days before auction. Yeah. That means it's at no later than, in that instance of, say, using that October campaign timeline from, say, this year, it would require that to be disclosed on the 18th. Yep. So on or before the third weekend of the campaign. Yep. Realistically...
and it's very specific in there that it's got to be at least 7 days beforehand is what they're saying. Now, at least 7 days beforehand means that if your auction is going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning,
on the 25th,
which a lot are, then you will not, as the vendor and agent, get to see what's going on the 18th of October, which is probably if you've ever sold property or been involved in the sale of a property, it will be instilled in you from the start that second last Saturday is vital as part of your campaign, because it's when a lot of buyers make their decisions.
Yeah.
They will come back to do their final inspection. They'll bring family and friends back. They'll make the final decision around, yes, am I committed or am I not? And a lot of that and they'll come in through the property at midday on that Saturday, and they'll walk out the door and the agent will say, what do you think? And they'll say, oh, we just need to talk to our family and friends over the weekend. We'll talk to you next week. And the agents do all their phone calls on a Monday, Tuesday, usually on a Monday, to try and wrap up, and then so that they're in a position come Tuesday, Wednesday to sit down with their vendor and advise them as to what they're going to do.
That being that week leading into their auction.
So to say that they'll know or they'll have a good idea is just not right. The amount of times that, and sometimes you won't even know come the Thursday or the Friday, then that people will make decisions. And I get that that's not always the case, and that if we want to do this, if you're going to disclose it, there's no point in just disclosing it on the day, because that defeats the purpose, and we'll get to other reasons. But a week out is a hell of a lot earlier than what vendors would really need.
It is. So that effectively allows the vendor, setting aside midweek open for inspections, where these days there's not a lot of activity on a Wednesday and Thursday. You don't get a line on how your campaign's going from the 2 or 3 people that come through during a midweek inspection. So effectively, you're looking at, for somebody looking to auction on the 25th of October, for instance, their first open for inspection on the 4th, the 11th, and then before that next Saturday, 18th, they've got to have advertised, decide on their reserve and advertise it. And it's just too early. No decisions can't be made properly. And
we've discussed this too. I mean, a lot of a campaign to sell a property is that you've got a general idea. If you're in this city and you're selling a property that's got reasonable numbers of comparables, you've got an idea of what your property is going to be worth. But part of it is to use that campaign to formalise what your property's worth and to get a clear understanding. And 2 Saturday inspections, which is basically what the vendors will be asked to do. 2 Saturday inspections is not enough time to clarify exactly what the expectation from the buying public is going to be and what they're saying the property is going to be worth. It's just going to leave you short.
And I think what gets forgotten too is that there seems to be a 2-dimensional idea as to what a marketing campaign is about. It's oftentimes taken from the perspective of it's about advertising your property. Here, I'm putting this to you, pool of purchasers.
Yeah.
And it's almost a static response from the vendor. It's not. It's a two-way street in that the vendor, as you say, Jarrod, might have in mind what they think their property is worth, but it's also an education process, the marketing campaign. Sometimes vendors can be quite genuinely thinking, based on the comparable sales that they're aware of, that their agents has advised them about, they might have in mind, look, my property's worth around 1.1 based on sales ABC.
Yep.
They could be absolutely inundated on the first open for inspection. The feedback on the Monday is very positive. People might be asking for contracts. Can I get the building inspection done? Is the vendor open to pre-auction offers? Blah blah blah. Okay, we may not jump at that, but you get your second weekend. If the same feedback, gee, we've got to lift the quote.
Yeah.
Really. So we're not misleading people. But equally, we've seen plenty of campaigns where the vendor might think, my property is worth X based on ABC sales.
Yeah.
And it's crickets at the first open for inspection. And then the second open for inspection confirms that. We've got to reduce this quote, otherwise we're not going to sell. We've got to meet the market here.
And then before you even get to do the third, you've got to set your reserve. It's just... Anyway, so I mean, I had one 2 weeks ago where I walked through on, I think it was a midweek, and they'd had the previous Saturday. And I went there thinking, this looks pretty good value given this quote, and went through, and I said to the agent as I walked out, how's it going? And he said, every person that walked through on Saturday, we had 50 people through. Every person that walked through told me that I was before they'd walked through, as they walked in the front door, oh, you're underquoting this is way too light. And I think he said they had 50 groups through, and over 40 walked out and said, no, it needs too much work. And so the quote was there to reflect the work, but it photographed really well, because it had been nicely done up, but the floors were very uneven, and then once you got there, you could see other bits and pieces. And so there was going to be a fair bit of work to be done. But the photos didn't show that, and so once people walked through, they got the full appeal. So the quote was actually right.
Yeah.
but it looked as though it was cheap because it was a good-sized house that presented quite well in a really good street.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think looking at it from a buyer's perspective though, there's some good positive parts to it, and obviously having some certainty. You made a really good point at our meeting during the week around the building inspection process and the option of what we think could help in that, because one of the big things that buyers are critical of, and this was mentioned in the statement of information, is spending money on properties that they're not realistically a chance to buy. And I'm not sure if this was your idea. I think it was something that you said you'd seen around. But do you want to just go through that in terms of the idea of having a building inspection provided?
Yeah, well, it's not an original idea from my part, not at all. People have thrown up a way to eliminate and reduce some of the frustration from buyers of spending $500-$600 for a building inspection on a property that they may not have the budget for, and it's a learning process. You've got to do your homework. Sometimes you just got to go to auctions, miss out, and understand. Well, I've got to recalibrate.
Yep.
I've got to increase my budget, or I've got to look at something a bit different. But it's been positive, and there's no discussion of it with these proposed changes that the vendor. As in, I think other jurisdictions around the country, actually, the vendor's required, when they advertise their property for sale through a campaign, is to have a building inspection actually undertaken to provide interested parties for basically no cost.
Yep.
Then the idea could be, well, whomever purchases, they can then purchase that.
They have to buy for it. They have to pay for it.
They have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So there's any number of ways of doing it, but I think just to eliminate that cost.
I think that one was good though, because the concern then is, if the vendor's paying for the building inspection, whose interest is the building inspection being done in? Well, if you have a panel of building inspectors, a bit like us being from a valuation background, there was always a panel of valuers that people could choose from, or banks could choose from. In this instance, there's a panel of building inspectors. You choose one, and that's produced. If the building inspector's not doing the right thing by the buyers, it's going to get found pretty quickly. So they've got to be doing it on the right basis and on the right, because there's going to then be a contract between the two. And then whoever successfully buys the property, if they've used that building inspection, then they pay for it, and the others don't have to.
Yeah.
That sort of takes that risk out of it. And if you
saves time as well.
It does. And if you want your own building inspection done because you don't want to take that, then you've got every right to go and do that too, but you'll pay for it. So that would take that uncertainty away and take that risk of, and yes, okay, the argument will still be, I still have to go out and pound the pavement and do all that sort of thing. Well, you can take that out too if you're prepared to pay for it. And again, I hate sounding self-serving on this podcast, but if you want to have someone do that for you, you can pay for that as well. But if you want to save your costs, which a lot of people do, and a lot of people love property in Australia too, which is a really good thing, and if you want to go out and inspect it, then you can do that too. So there's ways and means around this. But I think the other thing that we've spoken about around the concerns and the things that buyers probably need to be a little bit cautious around is that one of the discussions that we've had is, as soon as a reserve is disclosed in this sort of manner, it will open it up to buyers coming in and going, whack, I'm putting an offer down at that level, or maybe even slightly above. And that can trigger things going forward. Now, how they're going to handle offers is something that probably needs to be discussed, because that's, I think, something that, if you're as a vendor prepared to put out there that this is my reserve, or you're legislated to put out there that this is my reserve, you should then have the right to, that's my reserve at the auction next Saturday. I'm disclosing it so that you'll all know for when you turn up next Saturday that that's where the reserve is going to be. But it also means I'm not accepting an offer before then, because I want to have my day. I want to have my day in the sun, and my day in the sun is next Saturday. That's the reserve. You come along and you bid. I'll be prepared to sell it at that, but I'm not prepared to sell it beforehand. Now, you might be prepared to sell it beforehand, and you should be able to choose that too.
Yeah.
But buyers need to be aware that if that's disclosed and if they are prepared to, then the worst fear for a lot of buyers can then become a reality. And the worst fear for a lot of buyers is an undisclosed, non-transparent process of highest and best.
Yeah. And that, as you pointed out earlier, Jarrod, that could happen today.
Yeah.
And somebody puts an offer in, a pre-auction offer, that is solid enough for the vendor to say, yeah, I accept it.
Yep.
And properties are sold all the time prior to auction. I think though that this will just
could encourage it more.
It will definitely encourage it more because once that there's more of a certainty around what the vendor's is prepared to accept once this is legislated.
Yeah.
And that, let's say it's that, $1 to $1.1 million quoted property, vendor reluctantly or otherwise says, okay, well, I've only seen a couple of open for inspections, but all right, my reserve's top of the quote range, 1-1. In their minds, people will understandably say, well, okay, that's what you accept. Bang, I'll give you 1.1. I'll give you a bit more than that, just to sweeten the deal, so to speak, put a bit of icing on it. And there's a bit more certainty. It'll probably encourage more pre-auction offers.
Especially if people see value well and truly above the quote price.
Particularly in a strong market.
Price,
in a strong market. And that'll bring it to a head. They'll also be encouraged to do so, as they are. It's got the opportunity and the right, the legislated right at the moment, is for, like if that's put down on a Monday before the auction, you're still outside of the cooling off period. Sorry. You can avail yourself of that 3-day cooling off because you are outside of 3 days prior to the auction. And so that's another little sweetener and another, not a sweetener, but another motivation, I suppose, for people to try to bring it forward, perhaps blindside other buyers who haven't had the opportunity, who haven't got their minds around it, haven't seen, they wanted to get mum and dad through.
Are planning to do their inspection on that last Saturday.
Yeah.
But the reserve's been disclosed on the Saturday morning. They don't get to look at it until the Saturday afternoon to make their final decision, and bang, there's an offer.
Yeah. So again, that's where purchasers could find themselves. Well, be careful what you wish for, because you may be locked out of an opportunity if if somebody jumps ahead of you, and if they do, and you're prepared, and you've had your building inspection done, you've got your contract, you're sure that this is the property for you. Yeah, I know I can buy it at that. The agent and the vendor they decide how that property is going to be brought to a head. Yeah. It might be boardroom auction. Great, you got your transparency as you would if you were standing outside the front of the property on the day of auction. But they may also decide this is the highest and best. Yeah. So what are you prepared to put up?
Where are you going to go?
And that is a total blind situation that no one enjoys it.
No, and you never walk away feeling, whether you buy the property, you sort of walk away, did I pay too much? Yeah. If you miss it, more often than not, in that scenario, people aren't prepared to put forward their highest because they are worried. Yeah. So they'll put forward, and then you miss it, and you think, I could have gone higher. So you lose the transparency.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to this. Yeah. And I mean, we've had a lot of chats about it, and every day we probably think of something new and a different scenario that could play out. So it'll be really interesting. But I spoke to a couple of people last week, and one of the interesting things was I use the AFL coaches analogy. I mean, the rules get changed in the AFL all the time with the best of intentions to try and fix a part of the game, and the coaches are masters and they just work a way around it, and they find another way to do what they need, and then the AFL has to change something. The same thing's going to happen, that real estate agents will find a way around these legislation changes to work in their vendors' best interests. And it's up to us when we're representing the buyers is to find ways to help our buyers to get the best result possible for them too. And if they want to do it themselves, then they need to do that sort of thing as well. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, look, I don't think so. I mean, there are a couple of other questions that people had that I've read, and either coming from agents as to, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? That I think are pretty easily addressed. I've had a couple of people suggest during the week, well, what about situations where you've got an agent will have a difficult vendor, so to speak, if there's 3 or 4 parties to it, or if it's a divorce, and they can be acrimonious, trying to set the reserve. Yeah, but you're going to have a difficulty a week before or on the day of the auction. The number of times that during the auction, 2 parties can't agree.
In a lot of a divorce or a deceased estate where there's multiple beneficiaries, there'll have to be a sworn valuation done. So they'll probably have the reserve in a lot of those set.
Yeah, that's true.
Before the campaign even starts. Yeah. So, I mean, there's queries around that. But sometimes I think real estate agents are asking questions to try and make an argument when, in actual fact, it's not a really concerning argument with the legislation that's being proposed. I think sometimes it's just an argument for the sake of it.
Yeah. So I think in our eyes, it's probably more that the issue with this 7 days, minimum 7 days, is it just doesn't allow enough time for vendors to get a feel for the market and where their reserves should be set, but also it can open a can of worms for buyers if they find themselves after only 2 inspections
not being able to make a decision.
Not being able to make a decision because somebody's jumped the gun, offered the reserve, and they find themselves cut out of the process because they haven't had enough time themselves to do their due diligence, let alone actually determine, is this for me? Have I seen it?
I think the biggest thing, Jordan, the biggest thing with all this is that setting the reserve and disclosing it is not going to stop a runaway auction result.
Ultimately,
it's just because you know what the vendor's expectation is doesn't mean you'll know what every other buyer's expectation is there.
Yeah.
And people see value at different levels. So the vendor might be prepared to sell it to you at a price that you're happy with, but if there's 2 or 3 other parties that are prepared to pay them more, they've got every right to expect that and to want that. And the auction process allows them to do that.
Yeah.
And so just because the reserve's disclosed and it's within your budget doesn't mean you're going to be able to buy the property.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks, Gordo. That's been a good chat. That's episode 112 of the Rewarding Property Decisions podcast. Please feel free to share the podcast far and wide and like all of our and subscribe to all of our channels. Otherwise, we wish you all the best with your property decisions. There's more information on our website, waiting.com.